that all the roof sheathing was full of mold or rotting. What do they do? What's the answer there? You wasted all your money. You got to rip up all that. I mean, does everything have to go and you start fresh?
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Design Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
And our amazing producer, Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Oh my God. So as always, we got some fantastic feedback from our listeners who might be some of the smartest people on the planet. I wanted to start off with something we learned further from in response to Scott's question from Ann Arbor, who asked if clearing his attic of blown fiberglass and air sealing it was a DIY project. So prior to the show, I asked John Riley of Casco Bay Insulation what Scott should do, and I heard back from him after we recorded the show. So I want to read what he wrote, and I want folks to pay attention because later in the show, we have two roof insulating questions, which is a departure for us, I know, from Corey and Ryan, and a lot of what John says is going to be applicable to them. So specifically, he talks about how moisture management becomes much more critical when you tighten up a house. So, all right, here we go. So this is primarily for you, Scott, and but you guys, Corey and Ryan, should pay attention too. Hi, Patrick. In general, I support homeowners taking on the dirty job of attic insulation removal. It will save a whole bunch of money. However, there are a few important details to consider before signing yourself and your family up for this adventure. Most people see bats and loose-fill fiberglass as fairly innocuous, but considering the mouse leavings, I like how he said leavings, roofing debris and the formaldehyde binders, you're removing a toxic mess. If you're comfortable wearing a protective suit and a full-face respirator, you'll be fine, but a paper mask and a long-sleeve t-shirt probably won't cut it. Further, always be on the lookout for asbestos and vermiculite, which often contains asbestos. I've run into other first-generation fiberglass insulating products that are very heavy, very coarse fibers. I would leave that to the professionals. Using a professional insulation vacuum requires a ton of planning so you don't accidentally install a thin layer of fiberglass dust throughout your home. Full containment of the room where the attic hatch is located with a zippered dust barrier is the only way to go. If you're scooping and bagging the insulation, tie the bags in the attic and remove them all at once to minimize trips throughout the house. It's also best to depressurize the space where you're working with ducted fans. A box fan in a window might help, but it's not going to be enough to keep dust and fiberglass from migrating to other areas of the house. An attic is a strenuous environment to work in, especially in the summer. Heat stroke is real and can sneak up on anyone at any time. Plan your day with achievable, realistic goals, set up ventilation, drink lots of water, and know when to quit. The disappointment of an incomplete project is small compared to your foot slipping off a joist and destroying a ceiling below because you pushed it too far. Been there, done that. Operating a gas insulation removal vacuum is relatively easy and relatively dangerous. The steel impeller spins at a gazillion RPM and will shoot a knot of wood through the vac bag and a neighbor's window easily. We typically set up the collection bag facing into an empty box truck. You should point it toward the woods or a windowless wall. This is a two-person operation. Someone always needs to be with the machine monitoring the integrity of the bag and how full it is. Once full, the bags are heavy. Even a bag of loose-fill fiberglass can weigh a few hundred pounds. Can you believe that?
Wow, no.
You have to have a way to get into the truck before you turn on the machine. Getting the old insulation to the transfer station and a pickup will take a few runs. We pay around $100 a ton tipping fee at the transfer station. Don't forget to add up the disposal time and the dump fees when considering whether to do this yourself. So he asked also, that's a lot of insulation to throw away. Can you put it back in the attic? And we said no. He says, nope. It only takes one small hard piece of debris to cause damage to an insulation machine. Anything removed should not be put in anyone's hopper.
We didn't think of that.
I did think of that, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Further, it's fiberglass. It's a very poor performing product compared to cellulose, which is the perfect product for this project. I'm glad to hear it's more affordable than fiberglass in your area. That's rarely the case. Make sure you install 18 inches of material so once it settles, you still have R60. Plan on 2 inches of settling in an open blow scenario like this. Also, plan for attic ventilation. The soffit venting and ridge vent must be done before the insulation process. There are potentially big condensation consequences if it gets put off. Gable end vents for cross-flow ventilation are also a good option. Before the attic is a moonscape of insulation, replace the bath exhaust fan and vent it to the exterior gable wall with sealed rigid metal ductwork. Once the house is tightened, you'll need it. I like the Panasonic Whisper Green Select with time delay and wire it for full functionality. If you have a wet basement, encapsulate and or dehumidify the space pronto. So we also ask, I'm certain the walls in this house leak like a sieve. Are there any practical strategies and low-hanging fruit for improving air sealing at the walls? Major retrofitting or exterior sheathing siding is not in the cards right now. He says if you can see the top of an open wall bay from the attic, stick a hose down there and pack it as best you can. Once full, block it off with a piece of rigid foam, and the air leakage you are experiencing in the living room is directly driven by air leakage into the attic and the basement, creating stack effect. Sealing up these two areas will slow the air movement considerably and will improve comfort throughout the house. The exterior walls are almost always at the bottom of my list, even when they are uninsulated. John, thank you so much for that very, very good email and information. That is fantastic.
I feel like we should pass this along in the form of a blog post, don't you guys think?
I think we should make it Ask the Experts question in the magazine too.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys are paying attention because that's some gold information there.
Mm-hmm.
We also heard from Taylor with regard to making accurate holes in episode 253. He was talking about our conversation about drilling holes in concrete and masonry. I find that if I draw a large plus sign on the concrete, I can adjust the location of the bit before it sinks into the wrong spot. At least pencil marks on the concrete afterward, but they almost always get covered up anyway. Thanks for the great show. I've been listening for years and talking about it to anyone who will pretend to listen. My partner overheard today and said, "Oh, it's car talk for houses."
I don't know. I don't think we're that entertaining.
I was going to say that might be the best compliment we've ever got. I don't think that's exactly true, but thank you. So I think that's good advice, Taylor. Oftentimes you hit a hard piece of aggregate when you're drilling concrete and it tends to drift the bit off course and you don't even know it. But if you had those reference lines, you can tell you're off center and you can try and work it back toward the middle again. Good idea. This is from George. Hey, FHB team, I'm loving the content. Your interviewees are very knowledgeable and very passionate about homes, but is there a way one of your subsequent guests could be more diverse? I'm sure there are several folks with great stories to tell and knowledge to distill from different racial, gender, and sexual orientation backgrounds. I hear all over the place how hard it is to find people to join the trades. Why not give a platform for more people that don't fit the white guy doing it for 30 years sort of mold? Please, FHB podcast. I'm sure it's difficult to find people like this, but I think it would behoove us all to make the tent of home building more diverse. Thanks so much, George. Amen, George.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I'm going to appeal to our listeners on the show. If you know any folks that are not white guys doing it for 30 years, we would love to have them on the program. So please make us aware of those people out there.
And in the magazine.
Yeah.
And for the magazine, too. Yeah.
I actually just reached out to some people that I think might be able to help diversify my sources for content. So I'm committing to making those connections.
I think we're going to try harder. It's been something we've been talking about for a long time, but it's just something that needs to happen. Not surprisingly, we heard from our esteemed editorial advisor, Mike Girton. He listens to the show every week, and you know, I'm grateful he bites his tongue on some of the stupid stuff we say. Anyway, he says, listening now to the lightning round in your discussion of sources for vetted construction information, and he sent this advisory. As the editorial advisor to Fine Homebuilding, it is my responsibility to warn listeners that some of the information dispensed on this podcast is of dubious accuracy. Use the information provided at your own risk.
When did he send that? I didn't see that.
He also weighed in on, we asked for feedback about the $90 rotary hammer from Harbor Freight, which I am certainly curious about. In the middle of listening, I just had to stop to respond to your request for feedback on the Harbor Freight $89 rotary hammer. Thumbs up. I've owned a few professional brands and models of rotary hammer drills over the years. I burned out a couple motors and drive gears. When I researched the drive gear replacement on the last one I trashed, it was $212, which is about what I paid for the tool. It died after 3 p.m. on a Saturday and the tool shop was closed, so I ran to Harbor Freight, which is open till 9, figuring I'd get a disposable tool to finish the job and give me time to research a true replacement. 3 years later, the Harbor Freight rotary hammer is still at it, and I beat the snot out of it, and so do all my friends who borrow it. Best part is I had a special 25% off coupon, so the darn thing was less than $70. So
That's great.
I heard from another listener who said the same thing, that they had that tool, and while they didn't use it constantly, they found it to be totally adequate. So there you go. You getting one, Matt?
I don't know that I need one. I just borrow my father-in-law's SDS whenever I need it. SDS Plus.
I do you need one, Kylie?
I was going to ask you guys if you borrow a lot of tools to save money, or do you typically just go and get them?
I just lend tools and don't get them back.
Yeah, he's lent tools to me. I gave it back.
I got to talk to Rob Watzak. He's got a couple of my prized possessions right now. He's, kind of breezy about that stuff.
It's not hard to believe.
So what have you been doing, Kylie?
Well, you remember my septic tank saga, and the result of having to dig up your septic tank every year, or expose it anyway, is that you wind up with kind of an eyesore in your landscape. So I decided to fix that, and I created this like holding bed, because I have a lot of things that need dividing every year. So it's going to be a functional bed that sort of takes care of that problem. So it's continually planted, but at the same time easily dug up and replaced. So I'm happy with that solution.
It looks great.
Yeah, and it gave me a good excuse to go buy a very expensive specimen weeping spruce. So
what'd you get?
That will not get dug up every year. So
what is it? What is it with the spruce? What is it?
Oh, Janai or something. I can't remember the cultivar name. I forget.
It's very handsome.
I bought so many plants lately that should go out of my head. Anyway, yeah, I'm happy with it.
So is that bagged mulch that was in the photograph? Did you move that?
I buy in bulk. I'm on my 4th yard now.
Oh my God, sister.
Yeah, I do a lot of mulching.
I bet that keeps you fit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's all wrapped up in a tarp like a big old burrito right now. That's what it looks like.
I think you need a tractor with a loader on the front.
My neighbor's got a new sit-down mower, and he sure likes to use that thing. He's desperate for grass to mow. He's creeping his way over to everybody else's property. He wants to use it.
Speaking of new tractors,
right?
Yeah,
Matt.
Yeah, we finally bit the bullet and bought a new tractor. Our old one had hit too many things. The spindles were bent, so it wouldn't mow flat, and it really needed 4 new tires because they were going flat basically while you're mowing, so you're constantly having to fill them up.
Sounds awful.
Yeah,
right.
So that contributed to the out of level mowing experience. It was a free tractor. The previous owners had left it behind because it was in rough shape. So we finally bit the bullet and bought a new small John Deere E130, I think it is, and it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Did you get the canopy?
No. There was one on our old one, and that was the first thing I took off because we've got so many low trees. Like as it is, I have to, pretty much do the limbo, 10 times while mowing my lawn. So,
hey, Kylie, let's be sensitive. Matt is a little melanin challenged, so yeah. I mean the canopy might be a good idea.
Yeah. Nope, just go through, 2 or 3 cans of sunblock, spray on sunblock every time I go out. It's fine. Mow in the dark.
Jeff, you were doing some of the highest painting I've ever seen any civilian do. What was going on there?
Well, that was my window in my office. It was just, it needed to be painted. That's all.
How many feet off the ground were you?
Well, let's see that the platform is probably about 22 feet off the ground.
Man,
I start to sweat. That's too.
Yeah,
that's
well, I mean that I it's like I have to have a safety harness for that.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
You tied off?
Oh yeah.
Do you own one, Jeff?
I went over the roof and tied off to a tree and the porch railing or a porch post.
Hmm.
Do you own, fall protection gear? Or did you
I do now.
Yeah, you went and bought some? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I just used an old climbing harness and tied that off. But in this case, I didn't think that was going to be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could die from that fall.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it's just been so I don't fall off the roof. Now it's like, all right,
So I
I'm
don't
off the roof,
die.
so it's,
You and I were talking after you had done that, Jeff, and you mentioned that like your body is so sore from, I don't know if it's the anxiety of being up there
Yeah.
or the like micro correcting that you always have to do when you're on a somewhat shaky ladder scaffold setup.
yeah, your muscles never relax.
Right. There was a time when I was a rose gardener and I had to shear these topiaries that were, 20, 30 feet tall. So it was a whole crew of us. We'd be on these apple orchard ladders, 16 to 22 feet tall apple ladder with heavy, gas powered gas powered shears. For 5 to 6 days straight, we would do that. And I remember feeling just what you're talking about, the stress of having to keep balanced and, it's scary and you got bruises all over your shins from leaning against the ladder. Ladder work is
And you have to
intense.
control the work because
Yeah,
it's very precise.
Right. Yeah.
Except no one's going to see it up there, dude. If you get the paint in the general area, no one's going to know the difference.
That's true.
Just have to get it everywhere in the general area.
Right. All the cracks and crevices.
So what's it like to paint over that epoxy repair stuff?
It was nothing. I mean, just I primed it and painted it like anything else. So we'll see how it holds up, but I think it's supposed to be pretty good from what everybody says.
Which one did you use for the epoxy?
The Abtron.
Okay.
You use that, Matt?
No, I've seen it. It's very smelly.
Is it?
I thought it was. No, wait, no, that's the stuff that smells like almond or
Bondo.
something,
Bondo
isn't it?
is smelly.
Yeah, Bondo smelly. Abatron, is that the one that smells kind of almondy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it had a smell, but I don't, it was nothing too strong that I had paid any attention.
Ian Schwant and those guys used it, or they used some Abatron product to consolidate or I guess sort of seal up some old oak timber that was like the sill for this old house, only about 4 miles away from me, actually.
Yeah.
It's what people who know what they're doing use from all of my observations.
Yeah.
Even Rob Watzak.
Especially if you can bill somebody else for it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing, right? It's very expensive.
Rob is going to start saying yes to being on the podcast more because when he's not here, you guys are making fun of him.
Well, I've had this conversation with Carol. Like, of all my friends, Rob is the most sensitive, right? Like, and I only feel bad in making fun of him when he's not here, or I don't feel bad.
What have you been doing, Patrick?
I've been taking the mower deck off my tractor every few hours just for fun, because it's gotten to the point now that it's 10 years old and it just seems like it needs something all the time. So I'm trying to resist buying a new tractor, but I think I'll just keep taking the mower deck off to amuse myself. 2 oil changes this week on the cars, and I put Freon in Carol's CRV this weekend. That's like one of my favorite tools. So I have a lot of favorite tools, but one of my very favorite tools is my AC manifold gauge set, which includes rubber hoses, anodized parts, and analog gauges. And you put all those things together and you have just a wonderful combination of technology. So I look forward to the Freon leaking out of the air conditioning system so I can replace it every few years.
Such a nerd.
So I think we should get to some questions because we have some good stuff today. This first one is from Corey from Dannemora, New York. And do one of you want to say where that is?
Matt should know.
Like north of
everything.
Plattsburgh. Yeah.
It's in supremely upstate New York.
Yeah, Clinton County.
He says, hi, I just discovered the FHB podcast referred to me by the contractor giving me a quote on a closed cell spray foam project. Shout out to Phil in Jay, New York. It's serendipitous that my first episode, number 247, insulating rim joist, installing bad insulation, and getting schooled in building science. I'm hooked. This guy needs to get a life. But anyway, my house is situated about 1/4 mile from where convicted murderers David Sweat and Richard Matt escaped the maximum security prison in Dannemora. I just moved into the house on 5/23, and I've discovered all sorts of long neglected issues. The most significant deal with insulation, ventilation, moisture, and water management. In a cold, humid climate where temperatures dip well into the negative digits with a ferocious wind and summers are hot and humid, I don't want to get these aspects of building science wrong. My home inspector discovered significant black mold on the attic roof sheathing. The sellers abated the mold with a product similar to Rapid Mold Remover to the extent that my home inspector satisfactorily signed off on the job they did. I'm investigating closed cell spray foam to convert the hip roof attic space into conditioned space. And I'm not only concerned about the $9,000 price tag for a depth of 5 inches or R35, but also the health implications of spray foam chemicals and future access to electrical wires, plumbing vents. In addition, is this even the most appropriate solution for my situation? So this is a really long question, and that's not the half of it. He actually has a YouTube video link that walks us through this house. So I think we should tackle this part of the question first. And I would say, don't be worried about spray foam if the person who does it is knowledgeable and has been doing this for a while. The surface temperatures have to be warm enough, and the foam has to be mixed correctly. But if done correctly, it is inert. It is safe. So I don't think you need to worry about that. If the exothermic reaction doesn't fully take place, that when the two parts are mixed at the nozzle, then you have problems with off-gassing of the respective chemicals. So that's what to be worried about. The other thing that happens if the surface temperatures are too cold, the two parts of the reacting together don't fully complete the chemical reaction that makes closed cell or open cell closed cell spray foam.
So does the timing of year, is there a better time of year to do it?
Absolutely. It can't be freezing cold temperatures.
Right.
In fact, I think the surface temperatures
shouldn't be super hot either, right?
Well, that's more of a risk for the installers, and they need to be careful that they don't burn the house down because the reaction is so aggressive. But if folks who want to do spray foaming insulation in the wintertime fully heat the space, right? They get temporary heaters and they cook the snot out of it before they spray foam the following day, right? They have to get those surface temperatures up. But you're taking a risk, and can you get every surface temperature up to this place it needs to be? It's probably difficult. So obviously the right time of year is important, and your spray foam contractor will know that if they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I've seen guys just, heat the space as much as they can, do like a thin flash coat, and then, add more later when they can get it warmer.
Okay. He said the contractors extol the safety and inertness of their products, deeming it comparable to stabilized plastic. One of the contractors uses Lapola 4G, which he asserts is Green Guard Gold certified for air quality. So Lapola also makes one of the closed cell spray foams that have less damaging blowing agents. So, I think that's good. I've included a video link to YouTube of the property, and you and the FHB audience should check it out. What should homeowners look for in an attic, knee wall, and crawl space scenarios when seeking to manage heat loss and control moisture condensation on the underside of roof sheathing in cold climates? Your team providing commentary on the actual video might be helpful for many homeowners. You mentioned in FHB episode 247 that a video like this of you visiting a property while honoring social distancing protocols could be helpful. In addition, please address the notion that I hear from the old timers, a home needs to breathe. Furthermore, if money were no object and my only concerns were health implications, return on investment, and R value, what is absolutely the best way to go? Fiberglass with baffles, cellulose with baffles, closed cell spray foam? From what you can see in the video, the roof sheathing is the roof sheathing in good enough condition for spray foam, or would I be wasting my money because I have a roof that had previous mold issues and presently has visible intermittent mold concerns? In other words, is this roof in need of serious repair and replacement where paying $9,000 would be a waste of money? What do homeowners do when they peel back the asphalt roof shingles and discover moisture damage to roof decking after a spray foam job? And if I pay for spray foam, should I go over the shingles and metal roofing within the next 10 years? Okay, so let's address these two parts of this question. The one thing about moisture issues with roofs, generally speaking, is they're very localized because roofs are hot. They dry out. Cold places tend to rot way more than attics because attics have so much heat that it dries the moisture out of the wood. So I wouldn't be worried about spray foaming the underside of a roof deck.
But where is that
reason
going to go if it does get wet?
That's what we're talking about. So that's why I mentioned it was very important to listen to John Riley's advice that you're going to need a strategy for moisture management if you seal up this attic, right?
Yeah.
So that includes the bath fans. You're going to need to make sure that the basement ceiling plane is sealed so that you don't have this constant thermal bypass that's moving wet, damp air from the basement into the attic where it's going to condense on the sheathing, or it's going to get up into the attic space after it's insulated and not go anywhere. Yeah. Am I getting that right, Matt? Do you think?
Well, I mean, he's not really going to have an issue with vapor getting to the sheathing from below if it's all sealed in spray foam. But if there's any kind of leak, I mean, this is an extremely cut up roof. I mean, there's all kinds of chances for.
I want to get to that in a little bit. Yeah.
And shingles are also, very bad at letting moisture out. So you'd probably have to have a topside drying strategy, I think, if you were to go with that. But I really don't think I would personally want to be spray foaming over sheathing that already has had mold issues.
Right.
And this is all board sheathing, it looks like, from what I saw.
Some of the parts of the home have board sheathing and some have plywood.
Okay.
So clearly there was an addition, I believe, put on the back of the house that actually overlays part of the original roof. You can see the roof shingles from the original part of the roof in this added attic space even. So he says, he goes on to say, my spray foam contractors both insisted on seeing the basement because this is the point I'm talking about is you want to stop the thermal bypasses that are moving basement air up to the attic level. They wanted to observe the stack effect, rim joist insulation, ventilation potential, and overall moisture situation. The adventure to the basement revealed to me more of a headache than I had anticipated, including what appears to be an abundance of mold and water damage on the joists. Why didn't my home inspector catch the condition of the joists, he asked. My father thinks it's possible that some of the joists appear this way because they were used as concrete forms. He showed me similar joists at his house that were used for this purpose. What are your thoughts? To me, they appear pitted and have visible water penetration. I hope the video discussion regarding insulation of attics, rim joists in the home's envelope, and ventilation via soffits, baffles, and ridge vents can benefit the FHB community. Woo! Oh my God. So
that's interesting.
This house has the most complicated roof I have ever seen. So if you folks listening, imagine a hip four-square with a pair of hip dormers on two of the elevations, and then an attached kind of another hip roof on the back side. And then the second floor space has knee walls. So, I mean, I can't see of another way to insulate this wacky roof other than spray foam. I just can't see it working. I think they're going to have to make a closed, unvented roof assembly and deal with any accumulated moisture some other way. It's so complicated. There's no way you're going to be able to air seal and insulate this with any other product.
Do you think those dormers were added? Do you think those dormers were added later on? That was the most complicated roof and attic I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really. It was funny because he did a good job trying to orient you in that video because there's no way you could just
show
the inside and have any idea what you're looking at. But yeah, I don't know what a great strategy would be here. I don't know exactly. You really need to deal with the air barrier somewhere, because there is none right now. And
There is none, and that's living space. You can't stop the second floor. You can't just like lop it off the house.
yeah, but also, I mean, there's almost no way to get moisture that gets into that attic out that I can see. I mean, there's no ridge vent right now. I mean, there may be a vent on the roof, but the sheathing itself is not cut back to actually let that air out. So there are baffles there that are doing absolutely nothing. And I don't know exactly what the strategy would be. I mean, you could, if this were a gable roof, you could put in gable end vents and that would do something. But hip roofs are already extremely difficult on their own. If it's just a normal hip, it would be difficult to vent. And the way that this thing is built, I can't think of a good strategy other than probably, like you said, spray foaming it. Because how are you going to access all those areas to put in the rigid baffles that you would need? Probably, plywood or something like that if you wanted to dense pack it. Or he could go, just leave that and do topside insulation, rigid foam over the deck.
I wondered about that.
Wait, with the dormers and stuff, I can't see that working. I mean, there's just not going to be enough room for that.
It may be difficult, but at least it would provide drying potential, because he's going to create a sandwich, an insulation, basically a water sandwich.
Well, I mean, if you stop air infiltration in the basement and you stop air movement from the basement up to the insulation air barrier on the at the attic level, and you control interior sources of moisture, cooking, you can't have 100 fish tanks. I don't see another solution.
Yeah.
So folks who do energy audits and weatherization work, they know what kind of houses and what kind of problems respective homes have. Garrison colonials, the overhanging second floor is always a problem. Second story attics with living space in them are always problematic because you have knee walls. So, I mean, this house has all of those things. It's just a really challenging structure, but it's good looking, so I wouldn't mess with it too much.
Yeah, he went on. I don't know if you were going to get to the rest of his question. He was talking about, looking for some sort of tax credits, grants, rebates, stuff like that. And he mentions NYSERDA, which is a New York State organization. And they do have, he wasn't able to find it, but I think it does exist. They have various home energy efficiency programs, and they do cover some of the costs if you meet the income thresholds for that kind of stuff. I have no idea how much he makes or anything like that. You basically have to figure it out based on the county that you live in. So, and the size of your family and stuff like that. But they will do the home energy assessment for free. So they'll probably be able to figure out, where that air is moving and, figure out if the basement is an issue and all that. And
I can guarantee it is because of the mold issues they had on the roof sheathing. You don't get mold on roof sheathing unless you have a source of interior air from the house.
Right.
It's either the living space, and most often it's from the basement because that's where most of the moisture is.
Because he does have a wet basement, that most likely is it. But he also has all those hatches. I mean, if the previous owner was, an old lady running humidifiers 24 hours a day, then that's also a strong possibility. But you never know. But the energy audit will help figure that out. And as far as I know, those are free in New York. And then, they'll help you come up with a strategy and cover, I think it's 50% of the cost up to $4,000 per project. So I don't know if you can split those projects up, between insulation and air sealing or what, but.
I found
Kiley,
a resource.
What were you going to say?
There's a resource I came up with, and I didn't go down every rabbit hole that it offered, but it's called Community Retrofit New York City, or NYC. And I can, give the link, but it looked like there was a whole section on incentives, and, I don't know, he might want to investigate that. But I was kind of curious about his question, the aspect of his question that had to do with if somebody were to go ahead and spray foam and then later discover that all the roof sheathing was full of mold or rotting, what do they do? What's the answer there? You wasted all your money. You got to rip up all that. I mean, does everything have to go and you start fresh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have had to deal with that. I don't know what the solution is there. I mean, you have to get all the sheathing out.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult to get it out. It's probably easier to take the roof off and
Yeah.
just frame a new roof, resheathe, and not use spray foam again, maybe. But I don't know.
And he asked if there are future, roof leaks. Can you detect them, right, with a spray foamed roof deck? And the answer is no.
The answer is yes. You walk around on the roof and find the squishy spots.
So open cell spray foam will drain water, bulk water, right? So you can detect a roof leak, and that's why I've heard many people advocate that for at the roof sheathing level. But no, if you have closed cell spray foam, it's not going to let water pass through it. So make sure your roof's in good shape before you do that. That's what I would say.
Right.
Yeah, and it is rigid enough actually that if you were to walk on the roof, you might not actually feel the squishy spot
Because of the foam.
Yeah,
because it's structural.
Because it's relatively structural. I mean, once it's between those rafters and it's bonded pretty well to those, it's pretty stiff.
Mm-hmm.
Any of you out there who've had roof leaks with closed cell spray foam at your attic roof sheathing level, how about telling us all about it? I'd like to hear the gory details. What do you do?
Listeners really need to watch his video too. He did such a good job with it.
It is true.
He had some funny things.
And so he, at one point in the video, he's scanning over the obvious accumulation of mouse poop that was on the fiberglass insulation, and he's like, "Mouse poop," and I'm like, "Yep."
He has a lot going on down there. You know that big old crack he had in his foundation wall? That seems like something. Would a home inspector be like, yeah, that's okay? That seemed like that was significant. And that standing water, he had some nasty stuff going on in there.
And as he points out, it's a very unforgiving climate, right? It's pretty wet, and the winters last a long time, so the drying potential is lower.
I thought it looked like he had termite damage on those joists in the basement.
So that's quite possible too. If your joists are wet, insects will flock to them like kids at a concert.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Corey, sometimes we have really definitive answers for people. You need, frankly, someone smarter than us to do a really critical energy audit. I would get a third party instead of your insulation contractor because, as you point out, they have a vested interest in selling you insulation, but your project might require more than just, foam. I would explore the NYSERDA programs and see if you can get someone out there for free to do a comprehensive energy audit and tell you how they think you should approach this. The video is helpful, but it's not going to take the place of an energy audit from somebody who knows what they're doing. But those of you listening, send your videos. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So we also heard from Jason from Swift Current, Saskatchewan, Canada. Hey, FHB crew. I'm a fairly new listener to the podcast. I listen to many podcasts during the week, but I must say I look forward to yours the most. I love listening to the wealth of knowledge you guys have and appreciate you're not afraid to say, I don't know. I own a home building company in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. We mostly focus on building custom homes from the ground up, doing everything from concrete to drywall, mudding, trim, cabinetry. We're currently in the middle of a complete home build and about to wrap up the framing. I've been dreading the next stage of WRB and getting the house closed in. Not only because it's a tall 2-story with 1-foot overhangs and stucco, but because it involves waterproofing a balcony over a living space. I've done balconies before using vinyl decking products like Duradeck, where the vinyl is welded together at the seams to create a watertight finished surface. Are you guys familiar with that product?
No.
So it's a lot like vinyl flooring, except they weld the seams to make a completely waterproof membrane that you also walk on. And it's ugly.
Sounds awful.
But they have very few options in colors and patterns, and most of them are hard to sell. My current client has pushed hard against using this product, mostly for looks, and she would really like the balcony to match the main floor deck, which will be composite decking. I have a few ideas on how to make this work, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. One thought I currently have is going with sloped wedges to the tops of joists and putting my 3/4-inch tongue and groove plywood on top. It'll be sloped to the side of the house to a small trough and downspout. I'm then thinking about waterproofing with something like EPDM or another membrane. After the waterproofing is installed, I will then install treated sleepers attached to to attach my composite decking to. The sleepers will be ripped to a taper to fit the slope of the waterproofing. The whole deck system will literally float with no fasteners through the membrane at all. To me, this seems like a pretty good idea, other than I can't get over the fact over time the sleepers will end up wearing through the waterproofing layer, compromising it. I'm stuck at this part of the details and can't get past it. Obviously, as a home builder, I want to build something that will last. I never want to sell something to a customer that will give a fear of being called back in a few years to fix a leak. I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts on this one, guys. So this is the hardest thing that people ask contractors to do, I would say.
Seems like it's come up before.
I'm hoping Matt has an answer.
I don't know that I have a good answer.
The good answer is to not do this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, his idea I don't think is terrible, except that I don't know that I love the idea of that. He says the whole deck system will literally float with no fasteners to the house at all.
That sounds really
And that's
not code compliant.
Yeah, that I don't know, gives me a little pause. But
You're worried about uplift?
I don't know that I'm necessarily worried about uplift, but I don't know. I just don't like the idea of that whole system not being attached, because I don't know what the railing detail looks like. There's a lot of things that are, kind of left out that, I haven't figured it out in my head to say this, that I'd be comfortable with that. There are structural drainage products. There's something called Dry Joist Easy, which is basically these aluminum panels that replace joists, and they kind of snap together and all the water can run down them. So you would, have to pitch your framing to begin with, and then you put these on top. They are the joists and they drain. So you could run a gutter to that. And then you could, insulate below that and, put whatever ceiling finish you wanted, underneath. But that's one option. The EPDM idea, I mean, a lot of people do that, EPDM sloped, I haven't seen people do it the way that he's describing, but, some kind of a mud bed or something like that, just to you don't need to get a lot of slope, an 1/8 inch per foot, 1/4 inch per foot. And then there are ways to, waterproof your penetrations when you're, screwing your sleepers onto that. And then, you can put whatever decking you want on top of that. That Dry Joist Easy, though, you can also put whatever decking you want on that. So you can use composite or whatever. The thing is, with any of those kinds of systems, your decking is going to be running sort of like it would on a porch. It's not going to be running like it would on a normal deck, I think, right? Or no? No, it would.
What do you mean? The direction?
The deck direction. The decking direction is going to be fine.
So depending on where you live, people handle this differently. I happen to know on the coast of New Jersey, they use fiberglass. They literally make a fiberglass tub, and have scuppers and do that. I've heard of the membrane roofing with the decking on top, and I think Ben Bogey has a detail for that we'll put up on the podcast page.
Yeah, because we had a similar question probably 6 months ago where Ben had rated on that.
So, I mean, I think this is always a risky thing to do. I understand why people want this, but, I think having roofs over things that get wet is better than trying to put a deck on top of things that get wet.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, and there's this other product called Bison that are little pedestals that you put the deck framing on. I know those are used a lot in commercial spaces on top of roofs, and they are adjustable in height, so you can match the individual slope of a roof that way, and they're meant to not damage the membrane underneath. I will tell you that when commercial roofers plan walkways to mechanical equipment on commercial roofs, they glue down much thicker pieces of a rubber material that is meant to be walked on, and it's much thicker. So conceivably, you could put something similar wherever those sleepers are going to be on your membrane roof, and it will be less likely to wear through the 30 mils or whatever membrane that the rubber is in its ordinary thickness, you could build that up to make it more wear resistant, I suspect.
I feel like every time we have a question along these lines, Patrick, you often recommend commercial detailing.
Because like those roofs are meant to be flat, like residential roofs outside of modern architecture, they're designed to shed water and not be flat, I mean, and even what we describe as flat roofs are pitched, but they, it's easier to keep living spaces dry if the water is moving off the roof quickly, right, than if it's sitting there.
Yeah.
So just a little bit about Swift Current. It's a pretty dry place, so I think that works in his favor. Winters are long, dry, and cold, while summers are short, warm, and relatively wet. The coldest month is January, with a mean temperature of minus 10 degrees Celsius or 14 degrees Fahrenheit, while the warmest month is July, with a mean temperature of 65. The driest month is February with 0.46 inches of precipitation. The wettest month is June with an average of 3 inches. So that's pretty freaking dry in my estimation. Do you guys want to know about the most famous person from Swift Current, Saskatchewan? I had to look at the Wikipedia page to see where it was.
You really
so
got into
Patrick
this.
Marleau is a current player for the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team. So go Pens. It looks like a lovely place. It really does. Okay, so this is one of our easier questions. This comes from Mike in Richmond, Virginia. The attached photos show some deteriorated wood expansion joint that I would like to replace. Is it simple as remove with a hammer and put in a new piece? What would hold the new piece in place since the concrete isn't attached to the new wood? Or would you remove it and do something totally different? There's also a small hole in one area. What could I, can I, should I do? Note the sticker on the SUV. He's got another question here, Jeff. This is only you can answer. Also, talk about who came up with the intro music and how it was decided to be used. I guess it's good.
Now, wait, you don't know that he put the emphasis on, I guess.
That was Patrick's emphasis. Colin did that.
I figured it was Colin. Yeah.
Colin
So it's from a
and Rob
music
Jake.
service we subscribe to, right?
Yeah.
And that's
What's it called?
Yeah, what's a theme song called? Who wrote it?
I would, yeah. I'd have to look that up.
And what do you pay for something like that?
I don't know who this
It's too
came
much.
from. So
It's too much. I like it.
what happened to the
Anywho.
old theme song? Because that's the second one, right?
yes,
Is
it
it?
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to the first one?
I think it was not generally liked
How long
by
is
the
it?
powers that be.
I think it was too broy.
Too broy?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro.
Okay, so Mike has this weird thing that people did for a period of time, starting in like probably, I would say the mid 80s, and this lasted through the probably mid 90s. And so instead of putting rubber or asphalt expansion belt between sections of large expanses of concrete, you do this to control cracking and what, Matt? That's right. That's it, right?
I think that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when concrete cures, the water is taken up, into the cement, and it shrinks. So you need a way to control the cracks so they don't happen randomly in the slab, both for aesthetics and probably strength too, right?
Yep.
So what people did between the big expansive is put these pieces of pressure treated lumber. And I remember when this stuff first started being widely available, and we were led to believe that it would last forever and there would be nothing happening to it. Well, of course, within a few years, this stuff starts to rot. So Mike's dealing with that now. And interestingly, there are products that come in a roll that you can jam in this crack, and they're made to accommodate the seasonal movement. And it seems like a pretty great solution. It looks easy. You dig out the old wood and then you put this in its place. But maybe I would be tempted to put a backing rod in there, and I would go to the company Sika for guidance on what product to use. I think what it is their 1CSL product, which is a one-part sealant, and the secret to using that successfully is you want the caulk layer to be half as deep as it is wide. So if you have this 3/4 inch space like they do, where it used to be 3/4 inch pressure treated lumber, you want the sealant to be 3/8 of an inch, and it should be 3/4 inch wide. And you get a 3/4 inch backer rod under this before you put the sealant in, and that allows the sealant to elongate when it needs to. If it's too thick in the center, it'll just pull away from one side of the concrete or both when it shrinks.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to get out that old wood, though? How do you access? How do you get that? How do you get
They
it?
didn't ask us that part.
It's probably
You just start
not.
chipping away at it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not really bonded to the concrete. It probably isn't extremely difficult to get out
I don't think
unless
really.
somebody
Start
put
scooping.
fasteners through it for some reason to try to really hold it in there. But hopefully
It's
not.
going to be rotted. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to come out pretty easily.
And
It's
he's
going to
not gonna-
take some chiseling.
Yeah, he's not going to have to get it, all out. He just needs to get it out enough to get that backer
Other
rod in
stuff
there
in.
and then his sealant. But yeah, I don't know if this actually works, but Sika Flex I think might do it. That's a self-leveling compound for joints. Comes in a tube. You just squeeze it in. So
I learned that there's a couple different types of Sika Flex. So there's one component and two component versions. I chose the one component because of the size of their respective material that they're trying to do.
yeah.
Mike, take a picture. Actually, buy that stuff from, I'll put a link on the product I found on Amazon. Buy a roll of that and put it in there and see what you think, because that seems like a great solution to me. It's made for this very thing. Okay, hello everyone. During episode 249, Matt and Rob spoke of spray foaming the underside of a roof as their choice of insulation for Josh from Tampa. On that, I have a question. I'm currently working to remodel the third floor of our house built in 1883. It was previously finished but has fallen into a state of disrepair. Most of the old plaster has been pulled from the lath and the entire room is covered in 3/8 inch drywall. Then plastered. Right now, there is not any insulation on the roof plane of the house, but there is loose cellulose under the floor and behind the knee wall and extending toward the eaves. I'm sure you can imagine it gets very hot up there during the day. I had been planning on having a spray foam contractor come in and spray the underside of the roof deck before the wallboard was hung, but Peter Yost and Steve Basic got me thinking about that plan, and here's the questions that came up. Doesn't spraying the foam of any type directly to the underside of the roof deck allow for any kind of defect in the roofing to go unnoticed, namely a water leak? Yes, we talked about that a little earlier. If you're using closed cell, it's going to keep the water up there. Open cell will let it drain. Doesn't spraying foam directly prohibit the movement of moisture because there's no drainage plane? Or is it the bays are sprayed and then edges of the rafters are left exposed to keep them from rotting due to trapped moisture? So I've seen both ways done. I think it's better to put the spray foam over the joist to stop or slow thermal bridging, right?
Yeah, and I don't think really you're going to get enough drying by leaving those exposed anyway. But
Is that very common to do that? Leave it?
yeah, if you're going to attach your ceiling finish to the rafters, then yeah.
If you were in my shoes, what would you insulate the third floor / roof deck with? Spray foam, rock wool, fiberglass? I'm afraid Patrick may keel over when he reads this, but the cost of the insulation up there isn't as important to me as making the space as comfortable as can be year-round. In other words, the cost of the solution to make the space as comfortable as possible is of no real concern. I don't believe anyone who says that. Every project has a budget, right? It's of concern. Are we supposed to answer this? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I didn't give it a ton of thought, but I was thinking, rigid baffles, because it sounds like this is completely open right now, right? It's like the plaster has fallen off. This was not a conditioned space. It's basically the attic, right? So kind of
yes, and
do whatever you want.
Interestingly, the insulation layer, the thermal control layer, is between the main living space and this attic space. So I guess they just decided to abandon it as potential living space, even though it had plaster on the walls. So,
I don't know. I would kind of lean probably toward dense packed cellulose, put in some rigid plywood baffles, leaving an air gap to the roof deck, and then net it, blow it, drywall it. I don't know.
So you're saying dense pack, the walls,
yeah,
and the roof line?
Yeah, and up the rafters if possible. I don't know how big they are. That's the thing. I mean, if you're not going to get a lot of insulation if it's only a 2x6, but
so as we say very often on this show, insulation doesn't matter unless you have a good air barrier, right? And attic / second story / third story living spaces that are a combination of attic and living space are, as we said earlier, notoriously difficult to make, to seal the air barrier and to have a good thermal barrier in all areas. So I don't like to advocate spray foam for a number of reasons, because it is very expensive. If it's not done correctly, it can cause problems. But also, sometimes it's the only way to solve these kind of problems. And, once again, you need someone to do blower door testing, energy auditing to determine where your thermal boundary is going to be, where the air barrier is going to be. And then you need to be able to have it be continuous. If you have any breaches in the air barrier, none of this stuff matters. That's why I think spray foam is sometimes the only solution.
it definitely makes things a bit easier. You could just spray it everywhere.
Right.
Plug everything up.
Air seals.
Yeah.
So what would you do, Jeff?
I mean, I don't know whether cut and cobble of rigid foam would be a viable option here or not.
That always seems like the sort of the solution you want, but not the solution that's going to be most effective, right?
That's why it's only on the diagnostics wheel once with regard to
That's right.
air sealing.
Forgot about that.
And the thing is with cut and cobble is the spray foam connections between the rigid foam insulation and whatever you're sealing it to are not reliable. And that's why, building scientists say don't to do it, because as wood moves seasonally and other building materials move seasonally, that joint tends to break. And once you get that gap, once again, its effectiveness is greatly reduced or completely eliminated, depending. I love the diversity of architecture in our country, right? It's really what makes it interesting to travel around, because regional practices are very different, architectural styles are very different, and that comes from the 200 years that the country has been people have been building houses around. But some homes are just really hard to make better in terms of energy performance. And I think in at least two of our questions, you really got to think about that when you buy a house. Simple shapes are better, both in terms of new homes and old homes. But it pains me to say that, because I love 4-square homes. I love Victorian homes with complicated roof geometry. But boy, it does make it way harder to improve the thermal performance of these buildings. Yeah.
Well, and also, anything you do, you may exacerbate or create another problem. I mean, sometimes, the way that these houses, it may be working the way that it is. It may not be, you may want to use that space, but whatever that space is doing, if it's not, currently getting damaged by whatever's going on, you may create a problem by, putting in spray foam or whatever, I mean, even if you put bats in there, you may create a problem.
It's it's kind of cool. This is coming full circle, because it relates to what the old timers say. Well, a house has got to breathe. Well, I mean, they got it half right.
Right. It's too simple.
You don't want moisture accumulation, and you want materials to be able to dry, but you also don't want
wet
your
air.
Warm or conditioned air hemorrhaging out the building envelope. So when you do one thing, you got to really be thinking about the bigger picture, which is a theme we've been hearing over and over again from our pro talk presenters is that, all this stuff is interrelated. And when you change one dynamic, you can have a great effect on the rest of the house, which is what you were just saying, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of those problems that those old timers were talking about was, the period before anybody was insulating anything. And then all of a sudden they decided they were going to insulate and they weren't controlling airflow and everything started to rot, or it was pushing paint off because you had, moisture that used to be able to dry very easily in every possible direction was all of a sudden, getting trapped in the insulation, and the heat that was flowing out of that building, like just night and day, was no longer warming the sheathing and more often just the siding and, keeping the paint from falling off. So, so it's easy to create problems.
I think a lot of, I don't know, just as a novice, I didn't realize how much air or how much water and air, what am I trying to say? Air brings in a lot of water, right?
Yeah.
I think,
How are your BPI studies
that's
going,
kind of what
Kylie?
I'm thinking about. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about.
How's it going?
It's going well. It's like I said, I think it would be basic for you guys, but it's excellent for me.
Is it hard? Do you find it difficult?
I have to reread a lot of things. It's not super advanced. It's rudimentary stuff, but these concepts are kind of interesting. It's like you think it's so simple, but then when you really kind of pause and think about it, you're like, I need to reread that and really grasp it,
And couple that with, climates are so varied in this country. When you try to have rules, sometimes the rules are different depending on where you live. And,
that's true.
You can't just make blanket statements like you see on the internet. It drives me insane. People who are so sure about what they know, except, they're applying it to the entire country, but it doesn't work that way.
Right. Good point.
Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, we should all just live in plastic boxes. That would be a solution for everybody.
I got to say, looking at that video of walking through that guy's basement, I recently was spending a lot of time looking at the ductwork in my basement. And I know I have a wet basement and my attic is inaccessible. I don't, it's a lot. There's no hatch. If I had an issue, I'd have to take the roof apart to get at it. You know what I'm saying? Like
it's easy to cut holes in drywall, Kylie. You just wait, sister.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what's going on up there because I can't look. But because I know my basement's very wet, I'm sure there's issues.
Well, what you can do if you don't want to go up in the attic, and I
can't
blame
go
you
up
for
in the attic.
Well, you can.
You mean cut into the ceiling?
Is look for holes, thermal bypasses in your basement ceiling, right? And seal all of those up because, if air can't get to your roof sheathing, which once again, this is a constant theme today, you're not going to have the moisture problems on the roof sheathing, right?
Yeah, I think that's been done a bit here and there downstairs. I've seen signs of it.
Well, unfortunately, I want to do one more thing. So I don't know if you guys know this, but Justin has charged me with doing a feature article for the next issue on sawhorses, and I got to tell you, I'm
you're into it.
I'm totally uninspired, actually.
Oh. You talk about it a lot.
Well, because sawhorses are such a personal thing, right? It depends on the work you want to do. It depends on what emphasis you give your sawhorses: sturdiness, portability, availability, whatever it is. Like, there are many reasons to choose one design or product over another. So I would love if you all listening would send me your favorite photos of your favorite sawhorses, and if you could give me a little information of why you like them, I would be super grateful, and it might keep me from getting fired. So thank you if you could do that. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kylie, Matt, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Stay safe. Happy building.